Let me catch you looking at her again. Let me catch you looking at her again. Let me catch you looking at her again.
Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Raven, who is also Brooke, and in today's video, I will be talking about Sam Levinson and why I think he's a creepy director and writer. Now, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and to follow me on all my social media platforms. And remember that this is my opinion.
That's my opinion!
Nothing in this video I'm saying is facts, so please don't take it as such, and let's just get right into the video. So Sam Levinson was born to Academy Award winning director Barry Levinson, and his mother was also a production designer. And when he was younger, he actually had a few roles in his father's movies, including the movie Toys, which included Robin Williams and Jamie Foxx. Now, he made his writing debut in 2010 with the movie Operation Endgame, and then in 2011, he made his directorial debut with the movie Another Happy Day. And then in 2018, he went on to direct the film Assassination Nation, which he also co-wrote. Now, Sam Levinson got his big break in 2019 when he created and wrote the show and directed the show EUPHORIA. And EUPHORIA includes the stars Zendaya, Hunter Schafer, and Sydney Sweeney. Now, the show did have its acclaim when it first came out with its first season in 2019, especially for the cinematography, the fashion that it created. I mean, when you look back at that time, I feel like EUPHORIA makeup looks were like a big thing, especially on YouTube with tutorials that people were trying to do. On Pinterest, it became big. Just everyone's social media, EUPHORIA makeup was very popular, especially Alexi Demi with her character Maddie. She is definitely seen as like the fashion queen of the show EUPHORIA. And the show also had its acclaim with Zendaya, especially with a performance as Rue, who is a drug addict, and Hunter Schafer for her portray as Jules. However, the show also had its many criticisms that are well deserved, including the sexual depiction of high school characters, the way that it addressed trauma, including drug addiction, the way that it portrayed toxic, abusive relationships for teens, and just the overall nudity of, again, these are supposed to be high school characters. And what's interesting about EUPHORIA is that because it was created by Sam Levinson, now when he had an interview with the Academy, he was asked a question about it being a high school show, and here's what he had to say. I don't think it's a high school show because I didn't go to high school and I have no interest in high school. I was interested in that age from a formative, emotional, psychological angle. High school also gives us the opportunity to introduce new characters and storyline, but so does the whole city. And I thought that was very interesting because it's like, well, if you really can't relate to being in high school, why would you write a show that's based around high schoolers and make the material so mature for an actual high schooler? Like, it doesn't make sense to me whatsoever why he would choose to do that, because you know, I'm gonna get to it later when I talk about the future of Sam Levinson. Now, when talking about some of the inspiration that he got for writing the show EUPHORIA, here's what he said. I was a drug addict for many years and I've been clean for many years now, but we kind of just talked about life for about 2 hours. And then she said, okay, go write that. And I was like, all right. And I went back and sat down and I wrote kind of a 25-page outline that consisted of mainly dialogue because I'm not organized enough to actually write outlines and send it over. And she said, you know, this is great, write the first script, and we kind of went from there. And again, it's like in his interviews, he's kind of admitting his incompetence low-key in terms of being a writer who creates tangible shows that actually have a plot that you can follow. Because one thing about EUPHORIA, again, okay, I'm gonna get to that when I get to the criticism of EUPHORIA. Let me move on. And then something else I found interesting is that in this Academy interview, he was asked about having a writing staff, and here's what he said. No, if this was a different show, I think I would put together a room, but I wouldn't even begin to know what to say to a room full of writers. If I were to show up and people were looking at me like, well, Sam, so what are the story beats? What do you want to say in this episode? I would be terrified. I wouldn't even show up to work. With season 2, my producing partner, Kevin Turin, was like, let's outline the thing first. And so because I love to talk about ideas, I outlined the whole season. And then I sat down to write it, and literally I could have cried every day because suddenly the life and unpredictability of it just disappeared. The only way that I'm able to write a show that's so personal is to just write it myself. If I had a writer's room, I would be trying to get to the next plot point, and those things end up suffocating my process. I just try to write with no sense of direction every single day. We can tell, Sam. Like, again, if you watch the shows that he has created, it makes sense when he talks about his writing process, the inspiration for everything. It just all ties together. Now, another I don't even want to call this show technically popular. It's more popular because of the many negative critiques that this show had. But this is The Idol, and The Idol premiered on HBO Max also back in June of 2023. And the beginnings of The Idol are very messy and very sticky, so I'm just going to do a brief overview about the beginnings of The Idol. Also, before I get into the beginnings, The Idol also starred Lily Rose Depp and The Weeknd. Now, at this time, the original director of The Idol was Amy Sitz. And the show was written in a way, and the whole premise of the show was supposed to be about a female pop star and just navigating fame and falling victimhood to basically the Hollywood machine and basically falling victim to the Hollywood machine. Now, it is alleged that The Weeknd did not like the direction of this show being so quote unquote feminist, and he felt like his character needed to basically be the center of attention. So now 80% of these episodes were already filmed before Amy just up and left the show out of nowhere. And at this point, that is when Sam Levinson took the reins and started helping write the show and also started directing the show himself. And mind you, HBO kind of already had this show on a strict tight budget, so having to wipe out all those episodes, I'm pretty sure had to be a huge financial loss, especially when you look at some of the old production photos of the show. Like, a lot of money was spent, so her leaving and just having to reshoot everything. And allegedly Sam Levinson, it takes him forever and a day to shoot anything. And also with Sam, you had to realize, like, the cinematography usually is out of this world. That is something that I will give him, and that I will never take away from him. So also, I can only imagine how much money out of HBO's pocket went into just the cinematography alone for The Idol. Now, the Rolling Stone did do an article before The Idol came out, basically exposing all the problems that the show is going through with production. And with this interview, they did actually interview a lot of crew members who were part of the show. And when talking about the writing direction of the show, this is what members of the production team had to say. Four sources say that Levinson ultimately scrapped Smith's approach to the story, making it less about a troubled starlet falling victim to a predatory industry figure and fighting to reclaim her own agency, and more of a degrading love story with a hollow message that some crew members describe as being offensive. It was like any fantasy that any toxic man would have in the show, and then the woman comes back for more because it makes her music even better. And literally, if you watch the show, again, the show was so heavily critically panned because the writing and the storylines were just simply egregious. Again, the cinematography was great. One thing about Sam Levinson, you are going to get great cinematography. That is something that I will never take away from him. But at the end of the day, his storylines are just so borderline disturbing that it makes you look at him like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And the show was mainly critically panned for just the way it just over sexualized everything in the show. And when I get to the critiques of The Idol, you'll understand what I'm saying. But that was just basically like a big criticism with a lot of critics who did talk about the show. And also its direction was heavily criticized, and also The Weeknd's portrayal was heavily criticized. And it's never been explicitly said, but it is alleged because the show ended with 5 episodes, but really there were 6 episodes in season 1, and then it just abruptly stopped after episode 5, and then it was canceled after that, so that 6th episode never even aired. Now, before I get into the criticisms of Euphoria and The Idol and why I think it shows why Sam Levinson is weird, I'm going to talk about 2 other projects that he also has done, which were Malcolm and Marie back in 2021 with Zendaya and John David Washington. And personally, with that movie, again, cinematography, great. But storyline wise, it kind of just began to fall flat. And Zendaya and John's performances in the movie were actually very outstanding, but the plot just wasn't plotting. He also directed the movie Deep Water back in 2022 with Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas. I hope I said her name right. Now let's get into the criticisms of Euphoria first. And with this one, again, it's going to be pretty brief, but I do want to talk about just the things that stick out to me that kind of made me feel like someone needs to study Sam Levinson's brain and why he chooses to do the storylines that he does. So let me just get into it. So one of the first things, there was a storyline where we saw the character Cassie literally on a carousel. Mind you, Cassie was supposed to be a promiscuous character, but for the life of me, I cannot understand why we had to see this girl who is supposed to be a high schooler in front of a whole audience on a carousel. What is this? What are we doing here? What are we talking about? Again, there are so many ways that you could have shown her promiscuity, and this is how you show it. Okay. Also, why was Kat a webcam girl in high school? I understand that, and one thing I did like about her character is that she was supposed to represent just being a confident plus size woman in high school. But again, Sam to me takes things far a lot. And again, why is she a cam girl to help her with her confidence? Why? And it kind of goes back to when that quote I was talking about, where he said he didn't even go to high school. So really, he doesn't understand the mind of a high schooler, what even being in high school entails. So it just again shows what the storylines that he chooses to do. Because then again, I asked myself, why put them in high school then? Why not just make them into college characters or like 25 to 27 characters? Like, why high school? There's a storyline where Nate, who is one of the worst characters in that whole entire show, so it's all gonna come together. But basically, Jules ends up having sex with Nate's dad. Mind you, that's statutory. And basically, Cal, which is Nate's dad, had been recording himself having sex with many people. He's also a closeted man. So Nate found a tape of him and Jules and began to basically blackmail Jules with the tape. And it was just, why? Like, for high school or even life, why? And then with Nate, for example, with Nate's dad, I feel like it's such a good base idea to have a storyline where he is a closeted man, but he ended up having this family. So he's been dealing with that. But just the way Sam flushes things out, it's just gross. Like, why? This does not add anything. It doesn't even bring us further context. It just makes things weird. Also, going back to Nate was basically an emotional and physical abuse to Maddie, who was his girlfriend on and off for the first 2 seasons. And there was a scene where he did choke Maddie out, and then he made someone else take the fall for him. Like, he blackmailed him basically. Again, why? And this type of thing will come up again in The Idol with another storyline also. Also, in the first episode, I believe, there was an animated sex scene with Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson from One Direction. Because I believe Kat was writing like fan fiction, so then he felt like he had to show it. And again, this will come up in The Idol with another storyline where you can describe something sexual happening or just something of sexual nature, but we do not have to see it. That does not add anything of value to the story because your viewers are going to comprehend it. Also, yes, Zendaya's performance as Rue is top tier. She definitely deserves the Emmys that she got for that performance. No one is denying that. However, I do understand some people's criticisms of the way that he portrays Rue's drug use, especially in season 2. It's just like there's no way that a high schooler is going through all of this. Because what do you mean Rue owes this lady drug dealer all this money and we really don't know how she paid it back? We don't even know how it's going to end because the show is supposed to have a big ass time jump in season 3. And why? Now let's get into the criticisms of The Idol. And I feel like The Idol is really where Sam Levinson's mask just completely slipped off, in the sense of, again, we need to study his brain to figure out what the hell is wrong with him. Why? Who thinks to write like this? So first I want to talk about the storyline, and going back to Rolling Stone, there's another article they did where they talked about storylines in the show that didn't even end up on air. And let me just read out to you the 2 storylines that Sam Levinson wrote that were not acted out. At various points, Levinson's scripts contain disturbing sexual and physically violent scenes between Depp and The Weeknd's characters, 3 sources familiar with the matter claim. In one draft episode, there is allegedly a scene where The Weeknd bashes in Depp's face and her character smiles and asks to be beaten more, giving The Weeknd an erection, and the scene was never shot. Another proposed scenario was for Depp to carry an egg in her vagina, and if she dropped or cracked the egg, The Weeknd's character would refuse to rape her, which sent Depp's character into a spiral, begging him to her because she believed he was the key to her success. And the scene was also not filmed because production could not find a way to realistically shoot the scene without having Depp physically insert the egg. What are we talking about here? Again, No one with a sane fucking mind would dare write a storyline like that that's supposed to be about a female pop star in the Hollywood machine. That's just demented. I don't care what anyone says. That's actually demented to write. Now I'm going to get into a few storylines again. I'm not going to go too deep in them, but these are just storylines that again showed me that something is wrong with Sam Levinson. So for one, there's a plot line where Lily Rose Depp's character Jocelyn, who is the main character of the show, so it's a storyline that her mom used to her with a brush. So there's a storyline where The Weeknd's character Tedros, he then Jocelyn with this brush in front of his cult members. Why? What is this supposed to make the audience feel? What is this supposed to even prove? Like, I understand that Tedros is supposed to be a pimp, and that does happen in Hollywood, or even in life in general, if you just get mixed in with the wrong person and you find yourself in a very dangerous situation. But with what the show is supposed to be about, why? That's just something I keep asking myself when I keep talking about these storylines. Just why? Also, in the first episode, there's a storyline where a nude leaks of Jocelyn where she has a on her face, and they show the picture. Again, why? If you're telling us that there is a picture of her, a nude, and you don't even have to go specific of what the nude entails, why do we need to see it? At that point, you're just trying to humiliate the character or even the actress herself. Because why? We don't need to see it. You already described it to us, and even describing it to us was explicit in itself. You could have just said a nude was leaked, because that has happened to many celebrities. They will have a nude leak without their permission. You did not have to show us. Also, Tedros, which is The Weeknd's character again, he has like a cult following of musicians. My issue is that some of the cult members are underage. And there is nudity. And going back to Euphoria, where I talked about the storyline where Nate tried to set up someone to take the fall for him and Maddie, there's also a storyline in here where someone who is supposed to be a famous male actor, he is accused of and set up to be looked at as all because Tedros didn't like that he was Jocelyn's ex-boyfriend and he had came over to a party that they had. So he decided to set him up, as if setting up someone for it's just because when I look at, first of all, Sam Levinson writing that storyline, because also what questions me, this will all come full circle, but there is a plot point in the first episode too where Jocelyn was doing a photo shoot and she wanted to show her boob, but there is an intimacy coordinator, and intimacy coordinators are very important in movies to make sure that the actors feel comfortable and to make sure that nothing happens to the actors and just to make sure that it's a comfortable environment. And in that scene, you can tell that Sam wrote it in a way where you're making fun of intimacy coordinators and trying to make them seem like they're not important. So it's like, do you take seriously the way that things can go wrong physically, sexually with women? Do you just find it, what's the word? Do you find it just laughable in a sense? Because why would you write a second storyline for a different show where someone is set up for or set up to be in a, that just doesn't sit right with me. Also, the writing was just stupid. Nothing about the plot made any fucking sense, especially when you look at the ending. The ending pisses me off so bad because throughout the whole show, Tedros was seen as not even seen, he was an abuser. It had been proven that he had abused women before. And also what's interesting is that when Jocelyn finds out that Tedros used to abuse people and she's confronted by her manager, she takes up for him and believes the story that, you know, he gave her. So yeah, but basically the ending of the show is that the victim is the abuser and the abuser is the victim. That's how I looked at it. That's the context I took it in. And I said, Sam, something is literally wrong with you. Because there was a scene where Jocelyn's character ended up like letting Tedros shot collar her assistant slash best friend Xander, who was played by Troye Sivan. So he says something about how like Jocelyn really is like a bitch and she's really the evil person, but the show didn't set it up in any way to where it would have made sense for her at the end to be the, again, I still had to go back to the point of why would you even write a storyline like that where it was proven that Tedros was actually an abuser. So now at the end, he's the victim? What? So now I want to get into what I feel like the future for Sam Levinson looks like and just my overall critiques of him. Now, I did watch a video where one of my favorite YouTubers, Kenny JD, did talk about The Idol. And something that she said very interesting about Sam Levinson is that the way he writes is almost for shock value because he really can't write a storyline that's feasible and that's actually good just based on basic merit, if that makes sense. Because if you look at the storylines that he writes, they're so inappropriate, out of touch, borderline just narcissistic in a sense of going back to the intimacy coordinator storyline with The Idol and how I feel like in a way he was trying to shit on intimacy coordinators, how he chooses to write storylines about people just randomly setting up someone for. It's just like you have to have some type of narcissistic traits to just continuously write these storylines where you're questioning the safety of people. And then one thought I tried to have with myself is I was like, well, I guess his storylines are good. He just needs to flesh them out. But then I thought about it more and it's only like a few storylines that, because like, for example, Rue's character having a drug addiction, it's like in ways he can flush that out better. Cassie being a promiscuous girl in high school, you could have wrote that better with good writing, great acting, but you did not need all those sexual things to just be explicitly shown to us. Like, that's why I keep saying throughout this video, like, what the hell is wrong with him? Because why would you depict this? Why would you write this? Why was this even an idea? How does this help push the storyline forward? Going back to The Idol, we were told that there is a leaked photo of Jocelyn and we were told explicitly what it was. We did not have to see it to understand the point. It's like sometimes he just does shit, and just like Kenny JD said, he does that shit for shock value because he probably is not that great of a writer. And unfortunately, we're stuck with shows like EUPHORIA and The Idol where it's like the basic idea is there, but the way it's fleshed out is just god awful. It's just honestly god awful. And then him talking about how he didn't even go to high school, and then I think in one interview he talks about how he has like the education of an 8th grader. It's like, well, why would you even write a show depicting high school? Why couldn't you make EUPHORIA in a way where it's depicted for college students? Why couldn't you write EUPHORIA in a way where it's set in college or over the age of 24? Like, why are we seeing them depicted as high schoolers? Why? And then sometimes you have to question if he even likes women for real. Because the way that he wrote Jocelyn for The Idol, or even just approved of some of the writing, it was almost like, again, a humiliation king. Why would you write this for someone? Why would you make this someone's reality? Why? And I understand that most of the actors and actresses that he has worked with doesn't have a lot of criticisms of him, but it does make you question. Like, even Sydney Sweeney said there's usually a lot of nude scenes that he wants to do where she's like, no, I don't want to do it. And thankfully she says that he doesn't fight her on it. He's like, okay, cool, I don't want to do it. Again, it's like, why do you even need all of these nudity scenes for a high schooler? Why in the cult with Tedros? Why are they underage? Why couldn't they just be over 18? Again, you're just writing stuff to write it at this point for shock value. And I have to look at HBO so weird because I'm like, does he really make y'all that enough money to where you kind of just sign off on things? Because I think I also read how he wasn't even sending scripts anymore for The Idol to HBO Max, which showed that like they really have a lot of trust in him. They really see him as such a big investment for their company because they're probably looking at EUPHORIA like it was a cultural phenomenon. So if he writes anything else, obviously that's going to be a cultural phenomenon too, which means more money for our company. And my last point is, honestly, I don't even know if his writing can get better. I personally feel like his writing can only get worse from here. I am curious to see how EUPHORIA season 3 is fleshed out because I do believe that that's supposed to be the last season and it's supposed to be like a big time jump. In my opinion, I just really don't see him getting any better from here. I probably just see him getting worse with his writing or just stopping completely. I personally think he needs to take about 100 steps back and look within himself and try to write something of actual substance. Because again, the cinematography is great. The fashion is great. But the writing is just god awful. But over the years, he started to get away with it. But like I said, The Idol just took the mask completely off. Because the mask was already slipping. But after that, people really looked at him and was like, You are a creepy ass dude who is seen as this controversial, boundary pushing director and writer when no, he's just creepy. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I would love to hear you guys' comments. Remember to keep it respectful. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and to always keep life cute, fab, and fun. And I will see you guys later. Bye.